The former boss of the Department of Justice, the ex-Director General Dr. Adam Thomason, has broken down in tears at the inquest of Cleveland Dodd, a young man who sadly took his own life at Unit 18. He said it's been extremely hard to deal with knowing he was, and I quote, the guy hurting kids, end of quote, in youth detention. Now, this really does bring up questions as to what is happening inside Banksia and inside Unit 18. We've been promised for years and years and years that Unit 18 would be closed down. It's still operating. To nobody's surprise, because we know that the government makes promises and doesn't keep them, particularly in the youth justice space. Gerry Georgatos is a youth justice advocate and joins us on the line. Gerry, good afternoon. Thanks for your time.
Good afternoon, Isaac.
This is a really awful tragedy that happened to Cleveland Dodd, and you and I can both agree that this is I guess, as a result of systemic issues within the prison system and the justice system, especially for young people. But were you buying those tears from Adam Thomason today during the inquest?
I'm not going to question what those tears meant. Everybody's got their story. But those tears don't bring back Cleveland Dodd. And they don't bring back all the people that have been deaths in custody. And they don't bring back all the maltreatment of young ones. And they don't bring back all the ones that died post-custody. And they don't bring back all the ruined lives. And they don't bring back anything of any worth. So whatever the tears were, whether they're meant or not meant, in terms of harrow to one's soul for being responsible, culpable for one's death, it doesn't wash. He had 7 years there. He should have done more. He was supposed to be a child trauma expert. He worked in welfare, where I question child protection is another beast that's problematic. And that's no proud boast to say that you worked for child protection or welfare. But I'm not going to question him as a individual or person. I do question his 7 years there. I do question his systemic failures, the chaos, the regime management in terms of its constant fails, its systemic dysfunction, its toxic culture, its advancement of people with no seasoned expertise in the field of child trauma, in the field of child health, in the field of vulnerable children with acute and chronic circumstances, psychosocial, psychoeducative, and in every which way. So a number of people have cried, a number of people have got emotional at the first tranche of the inquest, and now in the second tranche of the inquest. Too little, too late.
Yeah.
What this does say is that there's a level of inferred culpable responsibility, and we've got to get past this language of systemics and structures. All systemics and all structures are people. And they're guided by agreed policies by people, and agreed premises by people, and agreed operations by people, and agreed governance by people. And all these people, from the bottom end to the top end, have failed. But who's responsible? And who's ultimately responsible for approving Unit 18 and the concoction of Banksia Hill and its failures for 25 years? Is the state government.
Yeah, absolutely.
The state government, in terms of the Premier and the Minister for Corrective Services, are responsible, and the Cabinet itself and the whole of government. And Adam Thomason, in one sense, has taken a fall for the government to protect the government. And Unit 18 was approved by Mark McGowan and Bill Johnston. And there's no moving away from that. And it has not been closed by Roger Cook and Papalia. So they take culpable responsibility, in my view. There's also culpable responsibility with the Director General and all the deputies and all the management, and that needs to be scaled in to whatever degree. But also the guards, and also all those people that presented and teared up and said sorry. They didn't put internal complaints. They didn't formalise internal complaints. Any other workplace, any other institution, any other instrument of the state, whatever that beast be, if you don't put in formal complaints, they're workplace misconduct. And if they can give cause to an injury or death, it can be criminal misconduct. What we need is a Department of Public Prosecutors to consider and deliberate all that has come before and all that needs to come still, and press and consider pressing charges against a wide variety of people. We don't get a conviction. We've had people go to trial now in the last several years. They've been acquitted. If we don't get a conviction, we're not going to dissuade people from rogue behaviours, whether they're police officers or prison guards, rogue prison officers, rogue police, from prejudices, from misbehaviour. They'll continue on and maltreating people that lead to deaths in custody with a sense of immunity. When we get our first conviction and a suite of convictions, then people will think twice about what's been done. I've got to say that I'll believe it when I see it, that we get a conviction. Because how Mr. Ward, who died in the back of a van without air conditioning, in 4 hours of 43 degrees on the outside and up to 58 degrees on the inside, with the air conditioning having broken down, and the people driving the van and the people who sent them off knew that. How they weren't criminally prosecuted is beyond words. It's indescribable. How people who were directly responsible for maltreating Miss Jew and neglecting her, they're responsible. How any number of deaths in custody, how that officer, I don't mind saying, how that officer last to arrive, first to shoot, 16 seconds there, went past 7 police officers, went past an individual who had her hands at her side, Miss Clark, Miss JC from Geraldton. That is inexcusable. That individual was acquitted, and he wasn't found to have committed the killing of an individual on whatever level or degree of manslaughter. It's beyond words, it's indescribable. Other citizens in whatever circumstance would be held accountable, but we've got a sense of immunity for people in deaths in custody. And let's say how many deaths in custody we've had. Since 1991, we've had 600, almost 600 deaths in custody without a conviction for unnatural or non-natural death and misconduct and of a criminal nature, much of that misconduct. We have not had a single conviction. We've had a lot of obvious evidence and testimony and conclusions that quite clearly have met the threshold of guilt. And I must also reiterate, as I've said in the past before, in addition to those 600 deaths in custody, we've had over 2,000. We've had 600 black deaths in custody. We've had over 2,000 white deaths in custody, non-First Nations deaths in custody. They're actually at a higher rate, and we've got to see that the system is broken. We've got to change the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to quickly bring up the fact that Dr. Thomason also admitted to subjecting juvenile detainees to long stretches in solitary confinement. We both know that was happening. We already knew that, but he has now admitted that that was cruel and an unusual punishment. That's, of course, contrary to his defensive testimony he gave at the Royal Commission and on the treatment of detainees with disabilities in October 2022. In terms of solitary confinement, now that we've had this kind of statement made at the inquest by Dr. Thomason, do you think that things might change in terms of solitary confinement?
The circuit breaker was Dennis Reynolds, the immediate past president of the Children's Court. He gave testimony that, had a wide catchment and brought people to account, the first individual to actually hold others to account. And that was a circuit breaker. That was incredible testimony in terms of the scale of things. There's more to it than everything that Dennis is a good human being, and also, like Hilton Cole Rara, the once in a generation, said. There are a lot of issues. The place has been a fail for 25 years, and it has been a destructive, cataclysmic force, and nothing therapeutic, restorative, or life transformative has ever been there, and it was never in that way that it was modelled, even though that's what they claimed in the beginning it would be. But Dennis's evidence stopped the show, and that was never before seen in any First Nations or Black coronial inquest into a death in custody. All that and the admissions by other individuals and the missteps by people talking, such as any number of individuals during the week and more to come, have clearly set the scenario for reforms. But what are these reforms going to be?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they've clearly set the scenario for the deliberation by the public prosecutors for charges to be laid against these people. If we get, and I don't mean anyone any harm,
No.
I bleed for all people, I step in everyone's shoes, but in my book, the state government has been criminally unlawful, doubly and triply and quadruply so.
I agree.
Disregarded the total decision. They've disregarded what Supreme Court and federal court judges are saying. They're disregarding a federal court class action before them. And even though the courts tell them it's unlawful to detain children this way, it's unlawful to have ISU, the Intensive Support Unit, now rebadged as the Intensive Supervision Unit. It's unlawful for indefinite detention and to lock down kids for no reason whatsoever on other occasions where guards have meetings and or they don't have enough personnel on. How's that the fault of the children to be put in that position and to be locked down for a day or two? And you go stir crazy even for one day in any scenario. But they haven't. They've broken the law. They talk about other human beings breaking the law and tough on crime. They're committing crimes. And the state government should be held to account. They should be hauled all over the coals. They should be charged. People who have made these irresponsible, unlawful decisions and approved them should step down. If the cabinet has been making that unanimously, then we need the dissolution of the state government. This is so wrong on so many counts, so unlawfully wrong. How can anyone take seriously them saying we don't want people to commit crimes, we don't want people to commit fraud, we don't want people to do unlawful things? How can you have that moral
high ground
stature and expect someone to do what you don't do? People do as you do. They don't do as you say, even though you do otherwise. And our government's more than an embarrassment. It's a cataclysmic, immoral abyss.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree with you, Gerry, and I think there's so much that needs to be done, and we say it every time, and the problem is nothing actually ends up happening, which is one of the massive problems. But
I have to say one thing.
You go on.
There has to be at least half a dozen to a dozen charges laid. If half a dozen to a dozen people aren't brought before charges, that will be a massive fail. If we don't get people held responsible for their actions, we're not going to dissuade others from doing likewise. We're not going to also dissuade them from not wanting to actually invest in the social return of turning these lives around.
Yeah.
But what were you going to say?
I was going to ask you, what do you think that the result of Cleveland Dodd's inquest is going to be? Because, we want charges to be laid. We want reforms to be put into place. We want things to change at Unit 18. But in your mind, because you've seen this a lot more than I have, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, what do you think the result of this inquest is going to be? What result do you think we're going to see?
I don't know, Isaac. I think it may lead to the demand that this Unit 18 be closed.
But will it be closed, do you think? I don't think it will.
Well, Hakia in 2013 harboured the children of Banksia Hill for 9 months. So nothing happened overnight. I think there might be an impetus to close it. There's a possibility. I know there are some rumblings in the state government to close it and to bring the kids back. But the problem I have is there's no political will to close it at this stage. There's some energy to do something about that. There was some energy that was despondent of Mark McGowan's comments of terrorist kids.
Yeah.
And that led to him resigning, even though he won't admit it. But I know best. It was on your show that I said that.
Yeah, you did actually. Yeah, I can remember that. You said that he would resign, and a matter of weeks later, he did just that.
11 days, 12 days.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah. And I know there are rumblings going on from people that, are not happy with even Banksia. And Banksia is the problem. Unit 18 would not have been considered if Banksia was not a time bomb in itself, as it always has been. And it's exploded many times. And we've seen all of that in recent years because we're paying attention to it. We have galvanized the lens of the public. It wasn't being paid attention to as closely as possible the decades before, because people just thought these are dysfunctional, aberrant, criminally minded kids, children who are rogue, children who come from families that can't take care of them, and we've just got to live with that. And we've got to put them somewhere. But Banksia Hill is what culminated Unit 18. These kids were not supported, not treated well, not loved, not validated. They were invalidated. They were dampened. They were harrowed. They were treated punitively. They were rough handled. And I will say, some people say it's got worse. I actually say it was worse decades ago when the language was rougher by guards. The slagging was rougher. The physical harms by guards to children were what we would say today inappropriate, but they were, close to bashing a kid, smashing a kid, roughing them up, and that all went on. And we had a culture at that time where this was acceptable. We lived, only a generation or two ago, we used to say, well, I gave him a slap on the back of the head just to get him going, a kick up the ass or whatever, right? I'm not going to have him talk to us like that. That's not the way you would treat your child.
No.
Or most people. But we accepted those behaviours in years gone by. And the conditions were rougher. Children are all the same. They have inherent longings. But I will disagree with something that was said in the court. That, and I will agree with Thomason, which I can't believe I am. It's right for him to say that they failed him. They failed all these kids, and they should pay the public with all the truth and nothing but the truth. And we go forward. And they should be held to account. But Thomason is attributed as saying, and Dennis is the one that's saying that these kids are worse now than they were before. There is some truth in that. And what's actually happened is these are the children of people who have had it bad from the beginning of life. And they're the children themselves, their parents who had it bad from the beginning of life. As each generation has been further betrayed, and some others have broken free from their families and done well, it doubly hurts that they've gone through things. The incidence of trying to dull your senses with drugs and meth and heroin and alcohol has increased. And people feel more bleak now than before. When intergenerationally, whether you're black or white, your ensuing generation is left behind. It's left further behind by 2 generations and then by 3 generations. The children of today actually have it harder than their parents, who had it unimaginably hard themselves, and who had it harder than their parents, who had it unimaginably hard themselves. We are building children with such loss of hope that they've seen no hope in 3 generations. They see no hope in their grandparents, in their parents, many who are jailed or who have died, depleted in half-lives. And I can speak with experience because I've worked with all these families generationally, 3 generations, and I've worked and seen these children who can't be supported because there are no supports there, the capability, just go from worse circumstance and a greater sense and loss of hope. I hope you know what I'm trying to say and mean, but they're in worse circumstance, and obviously they're going to be harder to deal with. More of these kids today have alcohol-induced neurocognitive impairments from FASD, from other substance misuse, from maladaptive misbehaviors that they've seen all their lives, from dangerous safety nets, and they're angry and they're suffering, and we're not helping them, and we're not working with rapport and residents in Banksia Hill, which should be a place of well-being. And psychosocial support and psychoeducative support should be a place of love and nurture. And then we're not helping them, crucially, when they're post-custodial, when they're released, and we're not doing anything to support them. We can be doing the prevention and intervention at so many intersections, and we're not doing it at any. And we're lying to this day. Dennis Reynolds was correct to say the government is spinning myths and public relations exercises, and they've got media to tell us how great all these things are when they're not. He's correct about that. But I've seen it all, and I've worked 20 years in part to contribute to getting it to where it's got now. And I hope it doesn't take another 20 years to get where it should, because we'll lose another 600 First Nations people, and we'll lose another 2,000 other individuals, other Australians in this country.
Absolutely. Gerry, look, I do have to go because we have run out of time, but you and I could talk all day about this, and it is a really, really important story. But can I thank you for coming on the radio today and being so honest and open, as always, and advocating for what matters. Thank you so much, mate.
Thank you to you and Youth Jam, and you guys are amazing. See you, bro.
Gerry Georgatos there, a youth justice advocate, joining us on the program this afternoon. I mean, it's just awful what happens to these kids in Unit 18 and Banksia Hill as well. Gerry has been fighting for change and reform in this space for a very long time, hence why I wanted to give him the floor today. And we've done that, 23 minutes, but I think every moment was worth it because he speaks the truth, he tells it how he sees it, and to be honest, he's right. The state government does have blood on their hands. There's no other way of putting it. There's no nice PR spin to put on this. This is a disaster. This is a disaster. What is happening at Banksia Hill and Unit 18 is a disaster. I can't say it enough, because it is. Young people are dying. 600 deaths in custody in terms of First Nations people since 1991. That's huge. That's enormous. That is a disaster. And the state government needs to look at this and listen to this interview with Gerry and go, crap, this is a disaster and we need to change things. Paul Papalia, who is the Corrective Services Minister, needs to hear this interview, look at the stats, look at the reality, have a reality check and do something. He promised when he took on this portfolio that he'd make changes. Well, I'm yet to see anything. The only thing we see on the Department of Justice's Instagram, Facebook pages is the PR spin that the government puts onto their social media platforms about how lovely these music programs are. And those music programs are fantastic, but they're not going to fix the mess at Unit 18 and Banksia Hill. They're not. That is the blunt truth of all of this. Love to hear from you. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, @YouthJamOnline.